What if I told you there were 5 facts you probably don't know about Martin Luther King? Let's talk about it. Number 1, Martin Luther King Jr.'s name was originally Michael King Jr. This happened when MLK was 5 years old. His father, Michael King Sr., traveled to Germany and was inspired by Martin Luther, who was a Protestant reformer during the 1500s. Being that MLK was a junior, he also changed his son's name from Michael King Jr. to Martin Luther King Jr. Fact number 2, Martin Luther King entered college at the age of 15 years old. Martin Luther King grew up in a household that prioritized education, and it makes sense because he was so smart that he skipped not only the 9th grade, but also the 11th grade, graduated at 15 and started college at Morehouse, an HBCU in Atlanta. Fact number 3, and this is the kicker, y'all. MLK received a C in his public speaking course in seminary. After he graduated college at Morehouse, he decided to go to seminary to study theology in Pennsylvania. And crazy as it sounds, they gave him a C in public speaking. Now, this fact is oftentimes framed as helping people understand that grades don't always define you, or that there's always a possibility to grow and learn to excel in an area. However, another truth is that MLK had always been a great speaker. Curriculum for grades can be implemented subjectively, and MLK's professor may not have understood or identified with his style of speaking. Another conversation can also be had about implicit and explicit biases and how they affect grading, but that's another conversation for another day. Fact number 4, he was hated by a great majority of the country before his death. Although years after MLK's murder, he's commemorated as a great historical figure, before his death, he was hated by most of the country. During a Gallup poll the year of his death in 1968, Martin Luther King had a disapproval rate of 75% in America. While he was living, he was also targeted by the FBI. They would have constant surveillance on him. His phone lines were wiretapped. They would try to find anything that they could to discredit his leadership or smear his reputation. Now, I want us to realize that these are a lot of the same tactics that were later used against the Black Panther Party. Now, if you want to know more about that, check out my video on the Black Panther Party. There's a lot of similarity. MLK was also arrested almost 30 times within his life, and oftentimes framed by the general public as a criminal. Fact number 5, I Have a Dream was only one of his many great speeches. I say that because many manipulative people today oftentimes only quote one line from this one speech.
My poor little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Now, this line is a lot of times purposely taken out of context to speak against things like affirmative action or diversity policies. It's oftentimes framed as if the mere acknowledgement of race to rectify systematic discrimination is somehow wrong. They use his words of equality as a weapon against equity, but MLK also spoke for equity as well. He also talked about how there was much more that needed to be done even after the Civil Rights Act. But instead of taking my word for it, let's just listen to what he had to say.
I must confess that that dream that I had that day has at many points turned into a nightmare.
Not only that, today many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps.
When will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality.
Is that many of the people who supported us in Selma, in Birmingham, were really outraged about the extremist behavior toward Negroes. But they were not at that moment, and they are not now, committed to genuine equality for Negroes. It's much easier to integrate a lunch counter than it is to guarantee an annual income, for instance, to get rid of poverty for Negroes and all poor people. It's much easier to integrate a bus than it is to make genuine integration a reality and quality education a reality in our schools. It's much easier to integrate even a public park than it is to get rid of slums. And I think we are in a new era.
And there's much, much more, but for the purposes of this video, we just gonna stop there. So let's honor Martin Luther King by honoring all aspects of his ideology. Let's honor him by also talking about the unsung heroes of the civil rights movement that we never seem to hear about. People like Medgar Evers, people like Fannie Lou Hamer, and people like John Lewis, and many, many more. All of these things are important. And if anybody ever told you any different, they lied to you.